and we are at the bottom of Lamed Tes Amud Beis, just after the Mishnah. The Mishnah began the conversations about what kind of things we have to be concerned about would become chametz. So you have whole grains or bran, etc., and adding water or putting them into water in the process of dehusking them, etc. But do you have to be concerned about it becoming chametz? So the Mishnah had said soaking the bran, whether for soap or for to make it as animal feed, would cause it to become chametz or could cause it to become chametz, and so therefore you shouldn't do that. Tana Rabbanan. So right after the Mishnah, the Brisa taught Elu Devarim she'ein boin l'dei chimutz. Here are types of grains or types of things that would not become chametz even if you added water to it. Ha'afui, if you baked the kernels, if you break the kernels, you bake the dough, it's no longer going to become chametz even if you add water to it. So really, if you took a matzah that's already been baked and you add it to water, it's not going to become chametz. And you may know that some people are careful not to put their matzah in water or water onto matzah. As the term gebrux, broken matzah in water. That's not because they think the matzah can become chametz, but because maybe the kneading process wasn't done well, and there is a pocket of flour in there that is it wasn't baked, wasn't mixed well, and now it's the first time it's come in contact with water. Now, really, it's not much a concern as well either, because the flour, once it's been baked, the flour is not going to become chametz, but they were concerned that the ovens weren't hot enough. So that's where the origin of the custom is. Obviously, nowadays with very hot ovens and a much better kneading process, that's not a concern. But they maintain that custom because that's the way they did it back when. But as this brisa clearly says, once something is baked, whether the wheat berry or the flour or the bread, meaning a matzah, it's no longer going to become chametz if you add water to it. Mahamavushal, or something that's cooked. You cook the flour. Becholut, or you put the flour into boiling water. Shecholta bereischen, if you put into boiling water. So the Gemara says, wait, if you're cooking it, of course it will become chametz. Adam avashalei mechameh. While you're cooking it, it'll become chametz. It means after you baked it, you cooked it, meaning you made matzah balls. You made knedlach by cooking that which was already baked, or a matzah bread. That's not going to make it chametz. Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Eimer, kemach shenafel techid laf. If you have flour and you have water dripping from the ceiling, from a drip, some sort of water that's coming in. Even if it's dripping in the entire day, it's not going to cause it to become chametz, because the constant dripping on that same spot is going to keep it from fermenting. It must be that each drop comes immediately after the other, that it's a constant drip. But if there's a drip and a pause, that's not going to stop it from becoming chametz. It's going to have time to start fermenting between each drip. Amri Devei Rav Shila, and in the Academy of Rav Shila they taught vatika, which is a type of food made of flour and water. Well, it's made with flour. We'll see that there are two types of making it, with oil or with water. So he said vatika shari, it's permissible. But the Gemara asks, but what about the halacha with the brisa that says Tanya vatika aser? Lakashi of the mishcha milcha. So it's not going to be a question, because we have one recipe, and the way you would make it is with oil and salt. And as we said earlier, oil and flour do not become chametz. Mei peres lemachmitzin. And the Bryce, it says it's prohibited, is talk about if you made it with water. So if you made water, flour, and salt, of course, it'll become chametz. If you made oil, flour, and water, that's permissible. Amar Mazuta lelimchi inish kedera bekimcha da'avishna. Don't, if you were adding flour to a pot in order to thicken the gravy or thicken the food, creating a roux or something. So by you're adding flour to it, even if it's flour that had been toasted already. So it's been in the oven and dried out in the oven, which generally we say that cannot become chametz because it's already been baked. Still, don't add it to the water. John's asking salt, water, and flour is glue. Yes, glue is generally chametz in the way we have it, but they would make obviously in order for it to be glue, it depends on how much water you have to the flour base. If you had less water, it's going to be glue. If you add more water, it'll be a roux, an einbrenn. So this is really like all things. The proportions will change the consistency. In any case, so what the Gemara says over here is that you shouldn't, even though that once you've toasted flour, you put it in the oven, it's not, and you toasted it, it's not going to become chametz anymore because it's already been baked. Nevertheless, don't add that flour into your food. You're cooking something and you want to make it thicker, so gravy. So you're going to add this flour. Don't add that to it because dilma lebashal shapir. Perhaps when you baked it, you toasted this flour. You didn't toast it long enough or on a high enough temperature, and so it never really got baked to the degree that it's not able to become chametz. And when you add it to your gravy, you're creating a chametz. So don't do this on Pesach. It's too risky because you can't be sure that it's been toasted well enough. And it'll come to chametz. Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef also said a similar thing. If you have fresh wheat berries and you wanna make a wheat berry soup, you're gonna eat it and it'll get cooked enough so it won't become chametz. And when you dump the barley, right, mushroom barley soup, so you're dumping the wheat berries into the pot. What's going to happen is they're going to become cooked enough that they're no longer going to be able to become chametz. But if they're touching each other, two pieces of wheat berry or barley are touching each other, the water won't get there quick enough and hot enough to stop it from fermenting, and actually that's going to become chametz because they're going to touch each other and become pasty and chametzi. So at the top of Mem Amud Aleph 40a now, because maybe when you put more than one wheat berry at a time into the pot, they're going dilma azla de one is going to sit and attach itself to the other one at the crevice in the berry, the wheat kernel, which has that crevice, and it'll block it from boiling it properly. And the heat of the water is not going to go there, and it's going to ferment and it's going to become chametz because the water didn't come from the four sides, meaning all completely around each wheat berry, and that'll become chametz. So,
could I ask a question?
1 second. So we said don't add flour, even if it's toasted flour, to your food, which you want to make a roux or you want to thicken it, because that may not be properly toasted to the degree that it cannot become chametz. And also the wheat berries, which we just said, that when you cook it in boiling water, the boiling will prevent it from becoming chametz, but that's only if it actually is boiling the water, the berry itself. But if there are multiple berries touching each other, they can prevent the boiling process from locking in the berry and actually cause it to become chametz. Yes, Michael.
Just curious, but none of these scenarios are remotely feasible for any of us on Pesach. I mean, we don't do stuff like this. This is not Pesach, Dick. I mean,
we don't have flour or wheat berries. It's we don't have Pesach flour, right? We don't have chametz.
So when did it pass out of normal use? I mean, do we know? Like how long in history did things like this happen, and they just knew how to do this?
The reason we don't do this is because we do everything commercial. We buy everything pre-made. We don't have, we don't grind our own wheat berries for Pesach, and we also don't make our own matzah. Other than those that remember Rabbi Krems, who did it 10 years ago. But it's just not done. We don't do any of these things. We buy everything we have. Most of the people are baking matzah for themselves 2-3 times throughout Yantiv. We buy everything, so we don't have this. We don't purchase flour and then make stuff. We don't purchase wheat berries and grind them up. 70, 80, 90 years ago, people were still doing this. V'amar Abaye, and Abaye further said, and another statement about cooking, this one from Abaye. Don't roast two wheat stalks with each other. Perhaps the juices of one wheat berry will come out and it'll go into the other stalk, and it'll cause it to become chametz. So Rava says, I don't understand. So why each stalk's got multiple wheat berries in it, and if you're worried that the juices will come out of one wheat berry when you're toasting it, and it'll go into the other, so who cares if it's two separate stalks? Even in the same stalk, they can come from one to the other. Even in the same stalk itself, it may go out of one end of the wheat berry and go into another one, at one end of the stalk and go into another one. So Rava said, actually, the whole concern doesn't begin because the juices of a wheat berry are fruit juices. It's not water. And we saw that the juices from produce will not cause chametz. It's fresh water that's going to cause chametz, not the juices out of wheat berries. So Abaye had said first, don't toast two wheat stalks together. And now Abaye will have retracted, even though he doesn't accept the statement of Rava that the juice is coming out of fruit juices and therefore there's no concern. However, he does retract this idea of not baking them together. Because he says as long as it is in the midst of being toasted, it will not absorb, the wheat berries will not absorb the juices from another wheat berry as long as they're falling, as long as they have where to fall away. The Amar Abaye said, "Haychatzva de avishna, zekifa shari, zekifa aser." When you have a pot or a jug full of wheat berries that you want to toast, is that if their opening is to its side, so this way whatever juices are coming out of the wheat berries can just run off, then we're not concerned about the wheat berries absorbing the juices from the other. If the vessel is upright, so this way, whatever juices fall to the bottom and the berries that are at the bottom are sort of sitting in it, that's where there's a concern. So you see, he's still of the opinion that the juices coming out of a wheat berry can cause another wheat berry to become chametz, but it's only if it doesn't have room to roll away during the baking process. However, Rava Amafil is a kifa. Rava says, Nami, even if it's upright, shari, it's still going to be permissible, because may Paris in it. Because even if the juices sort of collect at the bottom and there are berries sitting in it, may Paris in it, it's still only fruit juice. May Paris in machmitzim, and fruit juices do not become chametz. The next brisa is going to have a machlokas with multiple sort of retractions and changes, and the concept is the way they would the way they would process wheat was in a process of or barley. It was a process of putting it in water to get the husks off, and they would sometimes do it by putting it into boiling water for a second or two, and that would sort of soften or expand the shell, the husk of the wheat berry, and allow you to take it off. So the brisa says you cannot do this for barley, because if you do so, it's going to cause it to become chametz. Ein loises in sa'arim b'Pesach. If you cannot do this process of lisisa, putting the barley into boiling water to get the husks off of it, because it can cause it to become chametz. Ve'im loses nisbaku asuras le'nisbaku mutaros. But if you did do it, so you have to check each and every kernel, each and every wheat, barley. If it's split, so all barley and wheat, the berry has a split down the center on one side, and if in that center it cracks, so you see that it expanded to the degree that water got into it, so then that tells you that the berry itself became chametz, and you're not allowed to eat it. You have to burn that. Loinis bakum mutaris. But if it didn't split, then it's permissible. In other words, it never really started its fermenting process. Rabbi Yossi, however, Rabbi Yossi says, "Shurim b'chometz v'chometz samsam." Says even if you see that it did split, you can stop the fermentation process by dropping it into vinegar. Take this barley berry, this barley kernel, and that started splitting. It started cooking in the process of dehusking it in boiling water, and dump it into vinegar, and the vinegar is going to stop that process. It's going to seal it up. Amar Shmuel ein halach Rabbi Yossi. Shmuel says halacha is not like Rabbi Yossi. It doesn't help to dump it into vinegar. Rav Chisda Amar Marukva le'nizbaku mamish, and Rav Chisda said in the name of Marukva that it didn't break properly. Ella kol she'ilu menichem al pi chavis ein nizbakas me'alein. Of course, if it cracked already, it split. That means it began to ferment, and that's too late. But if it didn't split, but you saw enough expansion that if you were to put it near wine, the wine fermentation or the whiff of the wine would cause the fermentation to continue, and then it'll split, and then. That's the point that you could still dump it into vinegar, and it would stop it. Shmuel Aman is baku mamish, and Shmuel said that if it fully split, and he says, and that's why it's going to be prohibited. It doesn't work, and it's going to be prohibited. Says the Gemara, Avat Shmuel uvda bedura debei bar chashu nizbaku mamish, and Shmuel was lenient and said that as long as it didn't fully split, it was not going to be prohibited. Amar Rabba, and to which Rabba said, Bal nefesh leyiltis. If somebody is careful and concerned about chametz on Pesach, they shouldn't do this process. of putting the barley into boiling water to get it off, even if you can make sure that it won't split and get it out quickly. Don't take that chance. So the Gemara says, "My iri bal nefesh afil kul halmi nami." Why you say the bal nefesh, somebody who's careful? The Brisa clearly says nobody should do it. It's only if somebody did it, then you can start checking to see if it was done right. But the Brisa clearly says nobody should do this because it's hard to make sure that you're not creating chametz on Pesach. The Tanya in listen like it says that you shouldn't do this process on Pesach. What he meant was, no, somebody who's careful about chametz and halacha, not only shouldn't do it for barley, like the Brisa says, but even wheat. Don't do this process for wheat because if you do, it may come to chametz. That's the way he explains the teaching of Rabbah. Amalei Rav Nachman. So Amar Rav Nachman might say Abba. If somebody accepts this stringency of Rabbah, is going to end up eating unrefined flour because there's no way to get the husk off of the wheat berry without doing such a process. So he's going to end up with bad bread. And in fact, in the household of Rav Huna, they would do this to wheat. They would dump it into boiling water to dehusk it. Rabbi Bar Avin, and so too in the household of Rabbi Bar Avin, and Rava Amar Asaliltas. And first, Rava said it actually is prohibited. It's not only you shouldn't do it if you're careful; it's prohibited to do this. So Gemara says, well, what about the Brisa that says that you shouldn't do this process of dumping into boiling water to dehusk it with barley, and seemingly you shouldn't do it for barley, but wheat is permissible. So Rava said at first says, well, maybe what it means is that not only wheat, which obviously will become chametz, not only wheat, which is more porous, so water is going to get in there and it's going to and it's going to ferment, and so there for sure it's going to be a problem. Aval sari deshi, but perhaps I would have thought barley, which is smooth and the water won't get in. Ema shaper dummy. Perhaps you can dehusk it that way. Kamash malan. That's why the Brisa said it. So at first, Rava says, how do you know that the Brisa means only barley shouldn't be done? You shouldn't do this process to barley. Maybe even to wheat you shouldn't do this process. And the reason why it said barley is because I would have thought barley is more lenient because it's smooth, and that's why it said specifically even barley you shouldn't do it for. Hadar Av Rava, but then Rava retracted, and he said, no, actually muta lilsis, you are allowed to do l'sisa, this process of dehusking by putting into boiling water for wheat. How does he know that? The Tani we learned yotzin b'pas nakia v'hadra. It says your flour, your matzah, is allowed to be both full of bran, unrefined flour, or pas nakia, refined flour, meaning you had dehusked it and it's and you don't have the bran and the husks in it. Now, v'ef shenakia b'lei l'sisa, how you going to get it to be fine flour if you hadn't done this process of l'sisa? So clearly, it's talking about that they had dehusked it by putting it in the boiling water. So you see that that's allowed. Esav Rav Papa l'Rava. So Rav Papa challenged Rava, saying, "How do you know that that's the only way to dehusk it properly to get fine flour? What about this? But it says in regards to tuma, and we know that in order for produce to be susceptible to tuma, it has to be that it had been had water on it, had a liquid on it. So the halacha is that flour and fine flour that come from that a non-Jew made. So you bought flour from a non-Jew. So if it comes from the villages, so then you can assume it's not susceptible to tuma. If it comes from the big towns or the cities, so then you have to assume it's susceptible to Tumah. So the Gemara says, what distinction is there between a village and a city? The Kfarim, my time alav. My time. What's the reason that you can be lenient on flour coming from the villages and assume that it didn't have water in it, it's not susceptible to Tumah? Probably because they don't dehusk it as well, because in the villages, they're not as particular in making it really fine flour. Whereas in the cities, they want to make it fine flour, and so they're putting the wheat berries into water, into boiling water, to remove the husk. In any case, what we see is that you have fine flour, because it says both flour and fine flour, and it says that both for the villages and the city. Even though that it's clearly indicating that the reason why the villages are not susceptible to Tumah, the flour from the villages are not susceptible to Tumah, because they never dehusk it by putting it into boiling water, and yet it says it's fine flour. And it calls it fine flour. So the Gemara says, Tirguma akimcha. Now that what he means is the Brisa, even though it puts them together, flour and fine flour, you're not going to get fine flour from the villages. The villages are only going to be offering you flour. However, Basad and Nafik, Amar, after Rava left, Rav Papa wondered, my time why didn't I try and prove it from another place? The Amar Rabbi Zera Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, because Rabbi Zera said in the name of Rav Yirmiyah or Rav Bar Yirmiyah, Amar Shmuel, in the name of Shmuel, Chitin shel menachos ein lo sinesen. The wheat berries of a mincha offering, you don't put into boiling water. That's not the way you dehusk it. Now, even though that over there, the halacha is it must be fine flour, and they would sift it, and upon sifting it, in order to get it to be very fine flour. So you see that you have the concept of fine flour, solas, even though it was not dehusked by putting it into boiling water. So Rav Papa had a proof that there is a way to do this. In any case, Hada Amar Rava, but in the end, Rava retracted. Not only did he say that it's not prohibited to do this process of lasisa with wheat, and not only did he say that it's permissible, but it's actually a mitzvah to do it that way. Now, a mitzvah liltes is a mitzvah to process the wheat for matzah by removing the husks, by putting it into boiling water. Shenema, for it says, Shmartem es hamatzas. The Torah says, and we saw this earlier, that you have to guard the matzah from becoming chametz. You have to protect it from becoming chametz, and to do so consciously for matzah. Now, ilay debay lasisa. Now, what are you protecting it from? How are you watching it from becoming chametz? What does the Torah have to tell you? Make sure, be careful that it doesn't become chametz. Shmartem es hamatzas. You have to guard it. It must be that you're dehusking the wheat berry by putting it into boiling water, and so you have to be very conscientious and protect it from becoming chametz. What are you guarding it from, if not from the water that's on it from the dehusking? Now, ishimar delisha, perhaps it means watching it while you're kneading the dough in order for it to not to become chametz. It says, I don't need a pasuk for that. Shimur delisha lav shimuru. That I don't need a Torah to tell me in extra time, guard it, because that's when you're actually adding water to it and turning it into chametz by hand. So you just have to work the dough and bake it quickly. That's not a guarding. That's actually the work itself. The Amar Rav Huna, as we see this concept that it's not the guarding at that point, but Seika shal nachem adam amalek kresim mehem u'mavad sheyecha kazayis matzah b'achrona. A person can eat matzah made by a non-Jew, and you can fulfill you can eat as much as you want at the night of the Seder from those kind of matzah, as long as you eat matzah kazayas of real matzah at the end. Why? Because why wouldn't you fulfill the obligation of matzah with the matzah that the non-Jew made? So b'achrona in b'rishon you have to eat it. The first matzahs that you ate from the non-Jew would not fulfill the mitzvah. My timer. What's the reason? because he didn't actually guard it properly for the sake of matzah, even though that he actually kept it from becoming matzah. From becoming chametz. That's why you're eating it. You wouldn't be allowed to eat it if it became chametz. So clearly he kept it from becoming chametz because you're eating it Pesach night, and yet you're not going to fulfill the mitzvah unless you guarded it for the sake of matzah. So that's why you have to eat another piece of matzah at the end in order to fulfill the obligation. So so you see that there's the guarding during the protecting it during the kneading in order for it not to become chametz. That's not the fulfillment of this idea of guarding it for the sake of matzah, because otherwise the non-Jew also kept it from becoming chametz. So it must be that there's another step. So why isn't it sufficient to just from the baking you're keeping it from becoming you're guarding it? And clearly that doesn't count because it says that you didn't protect it, that you're not fulfilling the mitzvah from the non-Jews matzah. Which tells you that you need to guard it from the moment that it's in the you dehusk it by putting it into the water. And Gemara says, and how do you know that? Maybe the reason you don't fulfill the matzah, the obligation of matzah with the non-Jews dough that he made is not because it's chametz. It's also not because the kneading is not where you need the guarding, but really you do. And at the moment that it needed to be guarded, you didn't do it. At the moment that you started kneading it where it needs to be protected and guarded, you did. That guarding it during the kneading process would be sufficient. So the Gemara makes an argument that from the moment of Elisha, it would need to be guarded, and that would be sufficient, and that would count as shimur. This machlokas you may know as the concept of shmura matzah. Shmura matzah means matzah guarded, and actually all matzah that we have is halachically shmura matzah. It's matzah that's guarded. The shortened name shmura matzah really means shmura mishas katsira. That there are those that want to be strict, at least for the Seder night, that the matzah that they have is guarded not only from the time that the wheat is ground and turned into flour, but even from the time that the harvest began, when the wheat has been cut from the field. And that's what shmura means. Shmura mishas katsira. It's guarded from the time of the harvesting, as opposed to all matzah for Pesach. If it's kosher for Pesach, if it's kosher Pesach matzah, that means it's been guarded at least from the grinding process from the time it's made into flour.
I had a question.
And it's based on this idea, it's based on this idea that all matzah has to have a shimur, a protection for the sake of matzah, that it didn't become chametz. And Rav is saying it's at least from the process of dehusking where water could be used. The Gemara seems to indicate that the main halacha is that it would be sufficient. It would be sufficient from the flour process or the kneading process, but for the Seder night, we're strict to have it protected from, guarded from the time of harvest. Yeah.
So my question is, the maskan of the Gemara I thought was lesisa is actually a mitzvah to do.
Rava was suggesting that.
Oh, so that's not the maskan. Question the reason I'm asking is if you inspect like shmur matzah, whether machine matzah or handmade, and compare it to your average, Manischewitz, Aviv, whatever, there's a lot more bran in what we call shmur matzah than in the kind of commercial, kinds. So I'm just wondering it's not whole wheat. I wouldn't think it's whole wheat, but on the other hand, you can see that it's not as refined. The flour is not that they're using is not as refined, or so it looks to me.
Yeah, that's part of that's just a processing difference. Both machine matzahs could create the same kind of flour. Yeah. So Gemara says Rava had retracted and said that it's an obligation, and tried to prove it from the fact that it said that you're guarding the matzah. So you have to guard the matzah, meaning you have to create a process where it could potentially become chametz, and you're protecting it from that. Still, Rava did not retract and said you do have to do this process of lasisa to get it wet, to get the husk off. Because he told the people that would harvest the wheat in the field, that even at the harvesting, at the cutting of the wheat, make sure to do so for the sake of mitzvah. So this is the idea that at least for the Seder night, to be strict and have matzah that's been guarded from the time of the harvest, like Rava said. That the protection of the matzah, of the wheat, in order to keep it from becoming chametz, is needed already from the time that you harvest it, from the beginning until the end. Gemara says, Mar Berei de Ravina, Menaktele Ime Abba. The Mar Berei de Ravina, his mother would keep a bag of wheat for him and protect it for the sake of Pesach all year round from the harvest, in order to make sure that he had Pesach that was protected properly, Shmura. You couldn't buy it in boxes back then, so his mother would keep it for him to make sure that he had wheat protected properly for Pesach. We're now in Mem Amud Beis 40b. There was a boat full of wheat that sunk, and all the sacks of wheat got wet in this Chishta river. So this was not on Pesach. This was before Pesach, but it was a concern that the wheat berries that had become wet would flood the market. So Shari Rava Lazvuna Lenachim. Rava said, yeah, you can sell it to non-Jews. Don't sell it to Jews, but you can sell it to non-Jews. So Rabbi Bar Levi said to Rava, how can you do that? It's going to make it back to the Jewish market as well. Like we see, there is such a concern in regards to someone who had, by mistake, added a thread or two of linen into a wool garment, or vice versa, some wool into a linen garment, and he can't find it to remove it. Don't sell that garment to a Jew, and don't, of course, but even to a non-Jew. Don't sell it to a non-Jew, because he may then resell it to a Jew. And also, and you can't even make a saddle cloth that no one's going to sit on, because you sit on the saddle cloth is just to protect the back of the animal from the saddle. But nevertheless, don't sell it, because someone's going to use that saddle cloth when it's worn out and cut it into patches and put it onto clothing, and a Jew's going to buy that patch and wear it. But you are allowed to use it for tachrichim, for shrouds for a dead person, and to bury them in it. In any case, so why shouldn't you sell it to a non-Jew, this garment that has shatnez in it, the wool and linen in it? Isn't it because he's going to end up selling it to a Jew, and as a result, a Jew unwillingly is going to have this chametz in this garment. So the same for chametz. Hadama Rava. So Rava said, "You're right. Don't sell don't sell it in mass. Don't sell bulk to a non-Jew. Rather, sell it as much as possible in small batches." And sell it to Jews also, because this way it'll be completed and finished before Pesach. Before Pesach. You shouldn't make a roux on Pesach, which is where you're going to put flour into boiling water, into something that's being cooked to thicken it. But if you're going to, first put in the flour and then put in vinegar. And as we saw, the vinegar stops the fermentation of the flour. It sort of ruins the yeasting. And so you can put the vinegar in. And here, basically, the machlokas is going to be whether diluted vinegar inside a pot of food is going to be sufficiently acidic to ruin the chametz process. And some say, no, you can put in the vinegar first, and even though that it'll be diluted by the time the flour goes in, it'll be okay. Man yeshomer. So whose opinion is the second opinion that says even if it's been diluted in the pot, it'll still work? Rav Chisda Rabbi Yehudi. Here's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Tananas we learned ilfis v'akaderesh avirim merusachim, that it says if you in regards to Shabbos, you took food off of the stove. You had a chicken soup on the stove, or you had a pot of food on the stove, and you removed it, but it's still boiling. So obviously, it's not a rolling boil, but it's very hot. So on Shabbos, you should not put spice directly into that pot. But once you've dished it out into a bowl, so now the second vessel has begun to cool the food down. And now when you put spices in, it will not cook the spice on Shabbos. Or into even in a tureen, meaning as long as it's in a second vessel, not the pot that it cooked in. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yehuda says you can even put the spices directly into the soup, into the food that's cooked, unless there's vinegar in that food. So if the soup has vinegar in it, then you can't put it in because the vinegar or the tzir, the brine, is going to enhance the cooking or speed up the cooking. So we see that Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that even though the vinegar is already diluted in your soup, nevertheless it still has the strength, the potency of vinegar, and it'll cook whatever spice you put in. So too, it has the potency to stop even diluted vinegar will have the potency to stop the fermentation or the yeasting of the dough, of the flour in this pot. Why don't we say it's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, but which we saw earlier, Rabbi Yossi, that if you had these barley berries that you boiled to dehusk and it started cracking, that you could put it in vinegar and it'll stop it. And the vinegar will stop it. So Gemara says no. The Rabbi Yossi may be talking about something else. Because Rabbi Yossi talk about vinegar that's non-diluted. But if you dilute the vinegar, such as in this case where you put vinegar into the pot, and then you put the flour in, perhaps Rabbi Yossi would say that the vinegar is too diluted and it will not stop the process. Ula Amar Echad Zev Echad Zeh Aser. Ula says, either way, don't make a roux on Pesach, don't put in flour, whether you put in the vinegar before or you put in the vinegar afterwards, because Mishum Lech Lech Amrinan Nazira Sachar Sachar LeKarmel Tikrav. You tell a Nazir, someone who has accepted someone who has accepted upon himself to be a nazir, not to have wine or grape. You tell him don't walk through a vineyard. Don't come close to the vineyard. If you have to take a shortcut, it's not worth it. Walk around the vineyard. In other words, don't if you're not supposed to have something, don't get close to it. So too for Pesach, if you're not supposed to have chametz, don't put flour into water and then hope that the vinegar you're going to put in afterwards is going to stop the fermentation or the process of it yeasting. Rav Papa Shari leburdiki the beireish galvasa lemimche kedera bechasisi. However, Rav Papi allowed the bakers or the chefs of the Reish Galusa's household to use flour that had been toasted. Since the flour had been toasted already, it's not going to become a chametz. And he wasn't concerned that, well, somebody's going to watch and see, oh, they put in flour, and they're going to also put in flour, because people know they probably put in flour that's already been toasted. When there are servants around, would you permit something like this? They're not going to know the difference, so they're going to go ahead and do the same thing with real flour, not just toasted flour. That those that say no, Rava Gufa Machile Ravi itself would do this Kidr bechasisi, we'd put in the flour to make a roux out of flour that had been toasted, because he wasn't concerned that somebody else would not know and use real flour, and so he wasn't concerned. So these are the concerns of putting flour into water to create a roux or